Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to DIY Wellness. We're just going to give it a minute while we let Instagram catch up. Oh, looks like my Instagram page might be frozen. Let's see how that goes. Okay, just going to try one more time to go live there. Let's see how it goes. Give me 1 minute. Bear with me, folks. We'll do this setup one more time. See what we get. Okay. Okay. Just give it one moment to connect to Instagram, everybody, and then we are going to dive into today's topics. In the meantime, don't collapse. It's going to be okay. We're going to get there. We maybe got about 15 more seconds left or so until we can go live on Instagram as well. Okay, well, it glitched and it's not working, so I'm just going to deal with Instagram another time, and I'm going to launch in for you guys. So welcome to DIY Wellness. This is the show for people taking personal growth into their own hands. On this show, we explore different strategies for improving well-being and quality of life. And today, how am I taking personal growth into my own hands? Well, by learning to navigate the various collapses happening in my life and around my life. And if you're anything like me, if you're living in the same planet of Earth that I'm living on, then you probably have a whole bunch of collapses happening around you too. Some are being broadcast and televised. Some are happening within our hearts. Some are happening within our families, but they are happening, and they are happening on multiple levels all at the same time. So today I want to get into 3 things not to do during a collapse, 3 things to do during a collapse, and then I'll tell you about my personal collapse stories. These 3 things not to do and 3 things to do are validated both by engineers and psychologists. So this applies to structural collapse or mental, psychological, spiritual, relational, community, or civilizational collapse as well. So the first thing to not do during a collapse is to deny that it's happening or to freeze. Our instincts during collapses are usually at odds with structural truth. So in real structural failures, like a bridge or a building collapse, for example, hesitation is deadly. People freeze, they return to grab belongings, or they assume the worst is over. There's a structural engineer named Feng Fu who explains the pancake collapse. And it's when structures often look fine one moment and then catastrophically fall floor by floor by floor in on each other the next moment. So if collapse is happening, do not deny. Do not deny that it's happening, and don't freeze if you can help it. If you're already frozen, then we're going to talk about ways you can unthaw in a minute here. This is like denial, disassociation, minimizing, this kind of freeze thing. If you think about it in psychological terms, it's like, oh, maybe it'll stop on its own, or spiritually clinging to outdated dogmas and identities that are not actually serving the purpose of increasing your peace, freedom, and joy, but they might be making you feel safe because you're part of a community that believes the same fanatical thing you do. So it's not working anymore, and we can't deny that the collapses are happening. The second thing not to do during a collapse is don't try to stop the collapse mid-fall. Propping up structures mid-collapse will redistribute the weight in a way that makes it worse when it falls over. And excuse me, this looks like a grieving mom, for example, just carrying on and like not taking any time to let the collapse of her worldview happen and to grieve it properly. You can't stop a collapsing building by bracing it after the failure has begun. You will get crushed. Another engineer named Uwe Strosik describes the phenomenon of trying to hold up crumbling structures, which redirects forces unpredictably and increases the danger. So the parallel to us, like psychologically and spiritually, would be like over efforting or scrambling to fix things that are clearly breaking. Like if you're scrambling to fix a marriage or a job or a belief system that's no longer serving you, instead of just letting it fall. So the thing to remember here, if something is collapsing around you, even if it's something you wanted dearly, if it's collapsing, it can't be salvaged. It can be salvaged after you can rebuild, but you've got to let the collapse happening. So let go or be dragged. Collapse is momentum. It is not a malfunction. It's a momentum toward something new. Don't cling to the old framework. This is number 3. Don't cling to the old framework. So that's like building on a faulty foundation, clinging to old ways and trying to do the thing again. The engineering parallel is like the foundation is now compromised. It has cracks, and you try to rebuild on it. It's going to lead to secondary collapse. Engineers red tag buildings post earthquake, and they say unsafe to occupy because they know you can't rebuild on this faulty foundation. For us in psychology terms, it's like trying to resurrect the past. Okay, well, we'll just go back to how things were, or reconstructing your ego identity exactly as it was without understanding why the collapse happened, why the failure happened. So not allowing in the self-awareness that would reteach and train you to do something new. So don't cling to the old framework. Don't try to stop it mid-fall, and don't deny it's happening or freeze. Those are surefire ways to get crushed under the weight of whatever it is that's collapsing around you. So what do we do then? Okay, that's what not to do. That's great. But what do we do? Well, these are 3 ways that you can deal with a collapse effectively. This is structural. Again, engineers would validate this, or psychological. So collapse is part of a system. Letting it fall the right way is often safer and cleaner and wiser than trying to stop it from falling. So here's some things you can do. Do listen to stress fractures instead of trying to force solutions. So this is like a mindfulness thing. Engineers inspect for cracks, for the cause and direction, for patterns. They detect all that before rebuilding. Collapses whisper long before they roar. Right now, we're roaring through the middle of one. So this checking for stress fractures is something you can do in your own life for the collapses that are imminent but haven't started yet. But for the collapse of society, what we need to do is the next thing I'm going to explain to you. So right here, for any personal collapses you have, notice the stress fractures, and then you can start to address the things that are breaking before they collapse. Instead of patching symptoms, you ask, where was this load too heavy? So let collapse reveal what wasn't load-bearing, what wasn't truth, what wasn't sustainable after all. That's what it means to look for stress fractures. So this is the second thing now. The second thing to do is to allow the collapse while creating survival pockets. So for the collapse of society or any personal collapses that you're going through that are already happening, you want to do this thing that engineers call the triangle of life. So it's you allow the collapse and you create survival pockets. Like this is about having creativity rooted in reality. The reality is, yes, we're collapsing. I'm really here. The creativity is, what can I do about it now? And in engineering, in earthquakes or structural failure zones, safety lies in void spaces. So that's like a bathtub or under solid furniture, interior corners, things like that. So you're not stopping the collapse, you're surviving within it. And this is called the triangle of life. So in engineering and architecture, these safety pockets are like fail safes or buffer zones. It's intentional design elements that help structure absorb or redirect stress during a failure event. Their goal is not to prevent collapse, but to ensure that collapse happens predictably and not chaotically, to ensure that critical parts of the system are protected, like your life, and that there's time and space for people to exit safely. So examples of this kind of safety zone in engineering are crumple zones in cars, where the front end of the car is engineered to deform in a crash, absorbing energy so that the cabin where the people actually sit remains intact. That's the safety pocket. It's supposed to collapse strategically. Pressure release valves on boilers and engines and pipelines, they often have these safety valves that release the extra pressure. Without it, there'd be an explosion. So this thing of creating survival pockets for yourself is a way to manage collapses as they happen. This is, instead of fighting, you're creating an inner still point. So the parallel for us, the parallel for us when creating survival pockets in like spiritual terms is that we want to kind of do practices that are going to help us to be able to remain stress-free and in equanimity, even while we're in the terrible, terrible situation that we're in. So this is things like breath work or mindfulness, like practices that you do that you have, like that create a buffer for you from the psychological stress. So if you don't have some practices, you can check out other episodes of DIY Wellness. We have different practices in almost every episode that we're talking about. These practices, putting them into practice, is what creates for you survival pockets, safety pockets, the triangle of life within the collapse. Because within the collapse, we can either give in to our emotional despair, or we can fall back on our breath work, or we can fall back on our community of support, or we can fall back on our mindfulness training. So that's what it means to create survival pockets. So do that. You can't stop the collapses from happening, nor should you, but you can find a way to have a little less chaos within the collapse. So the presence of these pockets doesn't stop a collapse. It just ensures that you survive intact. And that's what we want, a more resilient, more radiant version of us on the other side of this terrible stuff that we're going through. The third thing to do during a collapse is to rebuild with better load distribution and redundancies. So that's more psychological flexibility and more adaptability. In engineering, modern retrofits use things like shear walls and flexible joints. This is like a way of distributing force instead of resisting it rigidly. So strong structures will bend before they will break. This is actually echoed by Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, where he says, in a conflict, be the one who can yield, who can bend and be flexible, because victory goes to the one who yields. So keep that in mind. The psychological parallel here is that when you design a new life, identity, or belief system, you want it to allow more movement, more uncertainty, more paradox than the structure that you were living in before that collapsed. Trauma integration isn't about becoming stronger. It's about becoming more flexible, more able to navigate life with all of its hiccups, ups and downs, back and forward. And rigid things tend to break. Flexible things tend to sail right through. So you want to build better with more load distribution and more redundancies, i.e. become a more flexible, more adaptable, more able to go with the flow. It doesn't mean you have to enjoy things that life throws at you, but it means you begin to know really how to handle them because you've created load distribution in your life. So I want to bring this all home with two stories of collapses that have happened to me. One where I handled it very terribly. I did all of the don'ts, literally every single one. And one where I handled it much better. It was a little bit later into my future where I was wiser and had a little bit more under my belt. So the first collapse was the collapse of my medical marijuana business. Some of you who've been watching for a while, you know that I used to run a medical marijuana dispensary with a buddy of mine in West Hollywood. And at a certain point, about 5 years in, we started working with another company and we were going to expand. And it turned out that company actually had this secret agenda to like hostile take over us. And so when all that was going down, I tried to deny that it was real. Like, they wouldn't do this, right? That's not their friends. They would never do that to us. So I tried to deny it was happening and I froze, which definitely made it worse. I tried to save it at one point, this thing that was now on a faulty foundation. We'd signed up to be part of it with this group. And so it had cracked, right? The container with me and my buddy had now cracked. We brought in this other group and they were nefarious. And so we tried to save it by moving it to the neighbor's house and like hiding the office. And like, that's building on a faulty foundation. And so I literally tried both of the things I told you not to do. I tried. And then I also tried the third one. After it was done collapsing, I tried to build the same business all over again in Orange County, so in a different town. And that's essentially like trying to do the same thing that didn't work a second time, because the truth for me was running the medical marijuana business wasn't actually right for my soul. It was a great thing that I did for those 5 years. I don't regret it. I look back on it and I learned so much, but I can see now through what went down that the collapse was a divine gift for me from the universe. And so even though I tried everything I could to prop up the old way, I'm happier now on the other side of the collapse. And so that's a message to hear too, folks, is like, if you're in something that you're trying to prop up, even if you think you love it dearly, there's a chance that you're going to be better off on the other side of it, having let it collapse. So keep that in mind too, because I didn't know I'd be better off. I did everything wrong and tried to hold this thing in place. I got crushed under the weight of it. And then once I was able to drag myself out from under the rubble and heal, I was much, much better off. And then that leads me to my second story of collapse, which is when my tailbone broke. So that was like a literal collapse of my body. And this time, because this was like 7 years after the medical marijuana thing, that collapse where I handled it poorly, this time I handled it much better. So my tailbone broke, and I didn't know that it was broken. I just had a fall and I hurt my butt, right? And so I was butt hurt. And I went after a couple days, it wasn't feeling better. So I went to the ER after it didn't feel better instead of ignoring it like I did with my middle finger, which broke back in high school, and I just ignored it. And then when my wrist broke 8 months later, the doctor was like, "Oh, your middle finger's broken too. We should fix all that." I was like, "Oh my God, like I have a fracture in my middle finger. I didn't know or care, or like I just like dealt with the pain." So like that's again not doing it right. And this time I did it right. I went to the ER, I got it checked, and I was like, something's wrong. I want to look at the stress fractures, see them clearly, and do what I can about it. I also created safety pockets during this by getting creative about how to do work laying down and how to stay current on my studies by reaching out for support. So I didn't just let the collapse of my body and the collapse of my bone structure collapse everything else. I found creative ways to be rooted in the reality of what I was stuck with. I was laying flat for 3 months, but also to bring my creativity online and say, that doesn't have to mean I'm miserable. There's a way to thrive in this, or at least to survive in this. And then the third thing is, by the time the tailbone happened, I had been practicing the coaching and psychology principles that I'm teaching you guys now. And I had barely begun to learn in 2021, but by 2021, they were more firmly rooted, or I'd barely begun to learn them in 2014 when the medical marijuana thing happened. But by 2021, they were more firmly rooted. And so these are the redundancies, the alternative perspectives and possibilities. And like, this is the load distribution, like my emotional regulation skills, my psychological flexibility to be able to say, oh, there's maybe more than one way to handle this, more than one way to make meaning about this. So those adaptability and flexibility skills, I did not have them in 2014, just did not have them. And I crumbled under the weight of my collapse. And now I have them more, and I was able to handle that collapse with a little more grace and equanimity. Not in the sense that, oh, it's more impressive, like who cares how it looks to other people, but in the sense that it was less miserable for me to be inside of a collapse. So that's the key. Like, this is not about virtue signaling. This is not about trying to handle things well so you can be a certain way in the world, although it does help to be able to control how you handle things. But the point of it is to reduce your own suffering and to increase your own joy and peace and personal freedom. So with that, I want to say we are living through a collapse in our society and in the world. There's no two ways about that, and likely within yourself as well. So don't deny it or freeze. Don't try to stop the collapse, and don't try to rebuild it on a shaky foundation. Instead, bring so much self-kindness as you allow the old patterns and the old paradigms in and around you to collapse. Use your creativity and clear-sighted look at reality to find survival pockets. And then when it's time to rebuild, have the courage to build something brand new, something born of the new you, post-collapse, the one rooted in their values, the person rooted in their integrity, and rooted in an understanding of our deep interconnectedness as a species. Collapse is not the end of the story. It's the part of the story where a deeper truth breaks through. So let it break through to you too. If what you heard here resonates with you, then please share this video in the comments or with someone who might appreciate it. And if you have any questions about this topic, or you want to try anything out and let us know what happened, please do that in the comments as well. We want to help you get unstuck and celebrate your wins. So remember, DIY wellness means do it yourself, but that doesn't mean you have to do it all by yourself. We'll be back again next week at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. Until then, keep taking personal growth into your own hands. Much love, everybody. Bye.